The existence of movements and everything else within the universe is allowed as long as this everything also does not have a real or absolute existence, which means nothing in a non-local way. The relative distinction between space-time and matter-energy does not really exist. This is so true that the proof is that the measured quantities of these concepts are always exactly proportionally related in terms of their variations due to relative motions. Space-time measurements are based on variations around the mean value of the void voltage. Thus, they are an illusion in the broadest sense, as all movement is only valid locally for an observer and not absolutely or for the entire universe. This illusion is given to us by the only limited validity of our concepts, since they are based only on variations, on oscillations around the average value of the vacuum voltage. The size and shape of the space-time measurements can change depending on the motion, as well as the number of spatial dimensions depending on the type of motion involved. The shape of space-time measurements is much more a localized relative proportionality than a fundamental element of the reality of the universe, even if it occurs according to a common rule everywhere within the universe. Measurements of space and time dissolve when viewed from nature's most fundamental point of view, the empty. Space with finite measures and time divided into quantities are not fundamental components of the universe. They always have only local and limited validity. Our intuitive notion of dividing distances and durations into smaller and smaller units reaches a physical limit in relation to ourselves, which we are also limited, and this limit reveals to us that space with finite measures and divisible time are illusory if seen broadly and not elementary concepts or constructs of the universe. If space-time measurements were really elementary, if space-time measurements were absolute in any situation, all observers, regardless of perspective or motion situation in which they find themselves, would always agree on these measurements. Dependent on motion, space-time measurements are a consequence-derived, secondary, localized. What is a meter? 1 meter is the measure that light moves by empty space in 0.003 millionths of a second. So, for space with measurements to exist for an observer, it always depends on motion. What is a second? A second is the measure of time that the second hand of a well-functioning watch moves in relation to the fixed background of the clock, moving 6 degrees angular distance. We can also define a second as the standard measure of time light travels 300,000 kilometers through empty space. Thus, for the concept of time to exist, it also depends on movement. What is speed? Speed is a measure moved or traversed through space in relation to a measure moved or time elapsed. Velocity is a measure of movement relative to another measure of movement. What is acceleration? Acceleration is the change of velocity relative to another movement. Acceleration is a comparison or composition of 3 movements. Acceleration is a movement through space relative to a movement through time, relative to another movement through time. What is strength? The gravitational force, for example, is nothing more than a curvature in the geometry of space-time produced by a movement rotational in the tension of empty space. When a force of any kind occurs, there is always some kind of movement involved. In the same way that acceleration, a force is also a composition of movements. What is work? Work done on a mass is the application of a force multiplied by the movement by the space that this mass demonstrates of this application. Like acceleration and force, work is also a composition of movements. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel and give your like if you enjoy it.